will say the most relevant skill that they could manage and master, hopefully immediately, is strategic communication. So the opportunity to really be more effective in convey the value of therapies to diverse type of stakeholder, including healthcare providers, payers, and patients. Mastery in this area can improve and enhance their impact on drug access and patient outcomes.
Welcome to SkillUp Lab. I'm Catalina Triana, and today we have a special episode focused on the dynamic world of medical affairs within the pharmaceutical industry. Joining us is a esteemed guest with a vast experience in commercial roles and access, working both at the country level and globally in big pharma. Since he's been in both commercial and access roles, I'm very curious to know your opinion about the evolution of the role of medical affairs. Together, we'll delve into this vision of the importance of medical affairs in access into high specialty drugs, and also with regards to the challenges that we're facing in access, right? So, from your perspective, I want to see, like, what do you think about how medical affairs can help and much more? So let's dive in. And with us today, it's Giovanny Leon.
Thank you, Catalina, for having me in your podcast as a guest. I hope that we enjoy our conversation today and have the opportunity to discuss how to really support our medical affairs colleagues to upskill themselves to provide even more value to the industry and especially to the healthcare system and to the patients.
I'm sure we will. But the first thing I'd like to do is to start with a regular question. So you tell me a little bit about your background, right? This is like the icebreaker just for us to get into the mood. So
Okay.
tell me, what did you study and how did you start in the pharma industry?
I already study business management and I end up in the pharmaceutical industry out of curiosity and following the advice of a friend of mine that already worked there. And he told me about the value of the type of work that we could develop in the pharmaceutical industry. I started in pharmaceutical sales for several years, then sales management, then moving into the marketing area, business management, and progressing my career. I have the opportunity to cover cover a lot of different functions in the pharmaceutical industry at country, regional, and finally at global level, which has been very, let's say, enriching due to the fact that we has been close to the healthcare system and understanding what patients really need. That I will say has been the driver of this of my career, especially trying to take the voice of the patient into the commercial and access decision, and collaborating with very esteemed colleagues with strong knowledge and expertise from different parts of the world.
You know what I like to hear is that you started as a sales rep, right? And I believe that everybody who starts there, not necessarily because it's sales. What I mean is everybody who starts like customer facing has a very unique perspective. And the higher you get, you will never lose that perspective, right? It's not the same to start from a managerial role already or from an administrative role, uh, because that, even if you go out in the field from time to time, the truth is that you will never understand how the dynamic is unless you have really lived it in a day-to-day basis, because being customer facing.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's a whole new perspective, whole different perspective that we already developed.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to start with the core questions, right? So could you share your insights on how access to drugs has changed in the last 10 years and your prediction for the next 10 years?
Okay. It's easier to talk about what happened in the last decade, and we already saw how access to drug has already transformed significantly due to various factors. We already saw the rise of personalized medicine, gene therapies, specialty care drugs, and more solutions for rare disease. We also saw the accelerated pathway that for some disease has been already provided. But one of the elements that already has been dramatically different is the greater emphasis on real world evidence. Technologies like digital health tools, telemedicine already also played a role improving patient access to therapies. And additionally, value-based pricing models and patient assistance programs has become more prominent, ensuring that patients have the opportunity to afford the necessary treatments easily compared with the past. Those has been the main changes. Looking forward, it's impossible to predict what is already going to happen, but the trend that we can see is more and more integration of digital health technologies and artificial intelligence in drug access and patient care. There will be likely a stronger focus on patient centric care models, increased collaboration between pharma, healthcare providers, payers, the whole ecosystem of the healthcare system. Those elements require from us, and especially from the medical function, to be at the core of the understanding of the needs of the healthcare system and how to collaborate better with the different stakeholders in the system in order to provide access to innovative therapies that are going to be more and more expensive with limited funding and resources from the healthcare system. There is going to be more and more tension on that area.
Yeah, yeah. And some of the things that you said sound a little bit like a science fiction movie, right? AI and digital medicine and so on. So, I mean, all that to say that your conclusion that it's medical teams will be more needed to, be on that potential scenario that we are watching in terms of, access. So,
Absolutely.
do you think so? So we can agree, right, that you see that a medical affairs is uniquely positioned to navigate this access complexity, right?
Absolutely, because medical colleagues already have a unique position to navigate a more and more complex drug access environment. The role of the medical colleagues already is like the bridge between clinical development, regulatory affairs, access, and commercial teams. They are in a very privileged of a position to provide critical insight that could really shape the access strategies. Their deep scientific expertise and understanding of real world clinical practice whenever they work in both areas, which I believe is the best case scenario. Medical colleagues that maintain the cable to the heart, the opportunity to really see patients in the practice. They have better position to advocate for patient needs. They are better positioned to really communicate the value of new therapies to the right stakeholders. Because if they have not only the experience in the past, but the current experience in those areas, they could really help the system, the companies, and the patients ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet, one thing is to be uniquely positioned to improve the healthcare system, right? And access to innovation. And another thing is whether they are ready to do so. So I'm being,
Yeah.
a little bit provocative here because just want to know what are your thoughts on this?
We need to recognize that many medical affairs professionals are already ahead of the game, but not all and not always. There is always a need of ongoing development. And the same way, an old expression that we use to manage continual medical education, more or less, we would say nowadays that is required the lifelong learning attitude for everyone in the pharmaceutical industry, but particularly for medical affairs function, because certain elements that are required nowadays are not teach in the scientific training. Things like health economics, policy engagement, strategic communication, negotiation, leadership, collaboration. Those elements not necessarily are the dimensions that they are more trained for, and they already need to be more open to collaborate and to be confronted with different perspectives. Investing in medical excellence, support, and capability building is crucial, and this includes providing training in those areas, and especially to foster a culture of continuous learning and adaptation. Flexibility, open mindset is the name of the game for the future.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And, we have been talking to many colleagues in the medical affairs area, and I can say that perhaps only one company out of dozens of company that we have talked to, most of them say whether, if I now master, let's say, I don't know, negotiation, is as a result of trial and error and making a lot of mistakes throughout my career. And
Mhm.
we're talking about senior level, right? But all of them agree that they never received like the proper support in terms of capability building. And perhaps, back in the day, that was okay because back, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, with mastering science, then the other part could be kind of like, managed. But nowadays, and I'm following just, what you're saying about what you expect that the access game works, that it's going to be much harder if we keep doing it with the medical affairs like in the past, like, let them figure it out, eventually they will figure it out. I think that this is a luxury that pharma cannot afford anymore. I think it's too expensive. That's kind of my thought.
Completely agree.
Yeah. So then, have you observed that internally? Why? I mean, perhaps let me change the question a little bit. Why do you think this is happening? Because I think that everybody speaks about the strategic importance that medical affair teams are gaining, but yet internally, like, nobody has realized, or I hope to be surprised, but so far, again, nothing. That if that's true, then who's asking internally the question, if they are so important, how are we helping them to be prepared for the capabilities that they need to really bring the value that they could potentially bring, since they are uniquely positioned to accelerate access, for pharma, and to improve the healthcare system.
What I will say is that we know that normally medical teams are exposed to robust internal support systems within pharmaceutical industry, but there is always room for improvement. Ensuring that medical affairs already have all the resources, the tools, and the organizational backing to leverage their capability fully is an essential change that is required. That might involve integration of medical affairs more closely with other functions. This is more relevant every day that they are able to collaborate with others. It's also important to secure that medical affairs already have a voice in a strategic decision, not only being perceived as a communications function or an external engagement functions, but also they could bring their perspective, especially in terms of the healthcare system and the patient needs, and incorporate those dimensions into the decision making. And of course, it's important to provide to the medical function the platform to secure cross-functional collaboration. And that requires training, exposure, alignment, leadership skill, negotiation skill, time management, and energy management skills in order to be open and effective when they collaborate with others.
I mean, to me, what really resonated, I mean, everything I agree, right? But what really resonated out of what you said is that voice in strategic decisions. It's kind of like an interesting shift, right? So thank you for that. Then let's switch gears a little bit, and then I would like to ask you if you could share a specific moment or story where you and your team, right, as an Access. I'm talking more about your role in Access. If you ever had this time where you realized that you hit a wall that you could only overcome through medical affairs, and if so, how did you manage? What happened at the end? Any lessons? Any reflections?
I could recall a lot of experience because in the last year I have the opportunity to lead the capability building programs for 10 launches in 6 therapeutical areas. And I have the opportunity to incorporate not only the pricing and access perspective, but especially the medical affairs perspective together with the commercial teams. And always the medical affairs function has been critical in providing deep expertise about the value added proposal of the drugs in terms of the right patient and the right solution, and how to cup the innovation within the scope of the current standard of care. Uh, what is the advantage and when is really required? This thinking, together with the strong scientific knowledge and all the understanding of the clinical value proposition of the drug, has been always critical to secure that the access team and the commercial teams are prepared and aware of the potential roadblocks. Those elements has been always very helpful. One element in the exercise that I have been able to incorporate is the mock negotiation. When real life ex-payers, many of them with medical background, already present objections and their perspective about the value proposition that we are proposing. Those exercises help the medical, the access, and the commercial teams in the preparation and the refining and adaptation of the strategy based on the potential objections or roadblocks they could confront well
Yeah.
in advance. Medical always help a lot in that area.
Absolutely. And can I just ask you to elaborate a little bit more? Like, so these negotiations, these mock negotiations that you conducted, were beyond the science, or were just about the science? I mean, how did you see that it helped medical affairs teams to take it to the next level?
Okay, it was based or root in the science, in the value proposition, that the pharmacoeconomics elements incorporate elements of the standard of care's price value to the healthcare system, and how the innovation could play a role, and how the payers and the healthcare system evaluate new therapeutical options in light of what is available and the cost to the system. That is very different from country to country because they could have different standard of cares. Sometimes we have global standard of cares that not necessarily are available or used as comparators at the local level. Then the medical system helps a lot to understand that aspect. And the fact that they try to use the global value proposition to adapt to the local environment, discussing with ex-payers and policymakers about that, and realize how that resonate or not, because especially the negative outcome is very valuable in order to refine and improve further. That really helps to be prepared for the worst case scenario, and normally that accelerate the pathway to secure access to innovation in the countries.
Thank you. So I also want to be provocative again, if I may, because I think you have a very unique perspective for having been in both commercial and access roles, right? So the question I'd like to ask you is, what are the key insights and lessons that commercial and access teams can learn from medical affairs and vice versa, right? I think every has its unique advantages, but at the end of the day, I think despite all the efforts, we have been working a lot in silos. So, is there something that, you know, we can learn from each other?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe the commercial and access team can learn always from medical affairs the importance of scientific integrity and patient centricity. Medical affairs always bring to the table a deep understanding of clinical data and patient needs. Those dimensions can enhance commercial strategy and access negotiation because when everything is rooted on deep clinical understanding and real patient needs, the value proposition is more robust. And of course, medical affairs could really benefit from the strategic and operational insights from the commercial and access teams, particularly in market dynamics and payer landscapes. Those dimensions that are already those dimensions to which commercial and access are normally exposed are elements that could improve further the medical affairs add value to the function.
You know, I see this as a tremendous opportunity, because I think it's not anymore about who does sales and who doesn't, or who give access or who doesn't. It's more about the level of complexity is such that the only way to truly improve or bring innovation to healthcare system will require, now beyond collaboration, is true learning from each other, because that would be like a complete game changer. So thank you for that perspective. And then here we're gonna play a little bit like you're a magician. So if you had a magic wand, what one skill would you want every member of medical affairs teams to master immediately?
I will say the most relevant skill that they could manage and master, hopefully immediately, is strategic communication. So the opportunity to really be more effective in convey the value of therapies to diverse type of stakeholder, including healthcare providers, payers, and patients. Mastery in this area can improve and enhance their impact on drug access and patient outcomes.
I think you're bringing a very interesting point, right? Because usually they're their final destination in terms of communication has been the key opinion leader or the physician, right? But now, if we're thinking that under this complexity, perhaps they will need to be more involved in discussions with payers, um, or even with patients at a different level, right, related to access. It's not the same kind of conversation, right? It's still about science, but it requires a different approach in order to be successful.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's important to understand that you could have a lot of knowledge and data in your head, but you need to be very strategic in what you communicate to who and when.
Okay, here I go. So we're starting an interesting dynamic in the SkillUp Lab podcast where we ask our guests to leave a question for the next guest. So you will have the chance to leave a question for the next guest too. A previous guest on SkillUp Lab and a medical affair professional from Spain has left a question for you. The question is, which would be the key imperatives for engaging and educating HCPs or healthcare professionals in a digital world and a VUCA world? And VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environments. Not an easy one.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very good question. And you can say that when it's not easy to answer. Uh, I would say a key imperative is to have an open mindset and the capacity to always learn because the environment is changing. Of course, the digital world is advancing very fast. What we witnessed the last 18 months in terms of artificial intelligence has been dramatic. And what is coming is even bigger. Then what we need to have is the capacity to keep learning, having an open mind, and understand that we need to be humble, not too um, confident on our previous knowledge, but have the opportunity and the capacity to keep learning, especially from younger generations or people more close to certain matters. That could be very helpful. And in the digital world, understanding the users, how they adopt or not technologies is very relevant. And the only way to learn is by being close to the consumers, to the customers, to the patients. And by the way, they not always want to be identified as patients. That's why we need to also use the expression users or consumers more
Right.
broadly than simple patients. And this capacity to keep learning, to keep asking questions, the right question, and adapt their thinking is potentially the most important one.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, today I was reading about that as the more we grow, and I'm not saying that everybody, right? This is a generalization, but the more we grow, like we lose this willingness to learn. And that's kind of like a professionally speaking, right? Like a sweet position or attitude. I don't know how to label that. And I was contrasting this with a statistic, and I don't know if you read it, that the World Economic Forum shared a year ago. Actually, it was released in June 2023, that 6 out of 10 professionals will require upskilling by 2027 just
Mhm.
to do the work they're doing today. It's not to be promoted. It's not to get the best. The next step is because the artificial intelligence and technology and the world itself is changing so quickly that just to do what you know how to do today, you will need to be upskilled by 2026 7, sorry, 6 out of 10.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that completely clicks on what you're saying, that it if it is not a cliche, right? It's, oh, you need to have this learning mindset, or you need to have it. Like, it's more like you better have it, otherwise you're not gonna be adding value, number one, and then probably, well, if you don't add value, then you know what happens next with your work. So,
That's absolutely right. But that figure is in a strong contrast with the reality. And my experience tell me that even with a strong capability building and learning initiative internally, uh, more or less just 10% of the total workforce is really open and willing to learn new elements and new things, because they are so consumed with the day-to-day activities that they don't prioritize learning new skills, new knowledge, new technologies. And that show us the potential gap between the evolution and the adaptation of people.
but that's a very good point. And what do you think then? What could be like the solution to that? Because I know a lot of companies invest a lot in manual resources to upskill people. But what if those resources are there and then people don't take it? How do we solve that?
We need to keep refining the way we provide learning experience. When, how, to whom, and understand that each one could have different priorities and interests. Then we need to be more adaptable, offering people things that resonate more for them. We cannot pretend that everyone is going to be happy receiving the same information, that for some are going to be maybe too basic, something that they already manage very well, and for others could be information that they don't need or use, or they believe they don't require. Then more customization is required, as well as incorporate those learning experience and timing into the daily activities. We cannot pretend that people do that on top of their day-to-day activities. Learning, upskilling is part of your day-to-day activities. Should be.
So it's not only about having that training there, it's also about offering learning pathways so people can, you know, get what they need the most or what they are most interested in. Yeah, that's a big task, but it's achievable, right? To me, the thing is, um, I think we need to take a step back and ask: do really organizations understand this, like the learning gap as a priority, right? To Because then when you put it as a priority, then you start improving it, to your point, right? How do we make it more engaging? How do we make it more relevant? How do we bring a message that investing time on upskill yourself, it's good, and it's not that, you feel like you're letting aside an important task. It's actually as important as other things that you need to do as a professional. Yeah.
Completely agree.
Yeah. So, well, I think this is it, but this is not it. The thing is that I was just checking the first podcast that I did, and the question that that lady left, probably you also remember her. She is Lamia Calfan for Medical Affairs in Canada, and the question that she left, like, I really liked it, and I kind of want to ask this question to everybody. So again, it's gonna be a cool one, because I would like to do, just telling you what I would like to do with this. I think that what we're gonna find, it's so diverse that it's going to be. I mean, I'm curious about what everybody answers, and then this will bring an interesting reflection, probably. So, if you allow me to ask you one more question, um, the question that she left is: if you were asked to different members of the organization what the role of medical affair is, do you think they would give the same answer, and why?
No, not even medical affairs community is going to give the same answer, because the role maybe is related with their specific function. And the bigger the pharmaceutical company is, the more specialized is the role of each one of the members of the medical affairs community. And honestly, they have so many areas to cover. They are already working in basically every area of the pharmaceutical industry. Then the role is very different, I would say.
Yeah, and
And you are
just
not going to have the same answer from
no,
everyone.
no, I know, but then I want to listen to your answer. What do you
Yeah,
think the role of medical affairs is?
I will say that in general, recognizing that could be very different response based on the specific function. In general terms, the role is to translate clinical knowledge into the benefit of the patient and the healthcare system, securing that the patient already have access to those solutions and the healthcare system is able to understand the value of those interventions for certain group of patients. This is more from the angle of access of the innovation, because doesn't matter how innovative is a drug, how impactful is the outcome, if the patient in need don't have access to the medication.
Yeah,
I believe they
absolutely.
play a critical role in securing that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Giovanni. Thank you for sharing your valuable insights. We hope today's discussion illuminates the evolving role of medical affairs and prepares them for the upcoming challenges and opportunities.
Yeah.
So, it was a pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope that this help does different perspective to the evolving role of the medical affairs function and the way they could uh, influence even further the innovation into the healthcare system.
Thank you, Giovanni. Are you finding that even at the top of your game, the skills that got you here might not be enough to carry you forward in this fast evolving world? Or perhaps you're eyeing a bold career shift that requires a new set of capabilities that you just don't have yet. Well, in either case, the world won't wait, and neither should you. I am Catalina, and this is SkillUp Lab. In every episode, we dive into the essential skills, insights, and stories you need to know to stay ahead in a world that is transforming by technological advances like AI. If all this sounds appealing to you, stick around.